7th night, after the tide forgot to return, the palace well sang from its dark throat, not with the splash of bucket and rope, but with a voice old as the seabed. "Who stole my name?" it asked. No one answered. The laundresses dropped their baskets and fled, cloth trailing behind like frightened birds. Only one girl did not run. She pressed her palms together, bent over the round of stone, and whispered, "I'm Leela. If you tell me yours, I'll bring it back." From the bottom of the well, water heaved like the chest of a sleeping giant, and something bright flickered up the shaft, bright as a fisher's flank at moonrise, a quick silver gleam, and then gone. The voice did not reply, but the bucket rope creaked in a little nod, a sound that felt to Leela's bones like a promise. Outside the walls, the sea sighed without a tide. Nizamabad by the sea was a city of doors. There were doors that opened on courtyards, where mango trees threw green-grey shade, doors that led to cinnamon-smelling kitchens, doors to cupboard shrines with smudged pictures of goddesses and dead grandmothers, doors that hid the palace treasury, and doors that were not doors at all until someone desperate knocked the right way. Leela had learned the city's doors by carrying laundry through them. She was quick, careful, and hungry for stories, for answers, and yes, for a little bowl of rice that wasn't thin as rainwater. Her mother had died the winter the fishermen's nets came up empty. Her father had gone inland to cut stone and not come back. Leela kept her mother's brass comb in a cloth pouch tied to her waist. In its teeth, a single thread of black hair still slept. When Leela was too tired to bear herself, she combed her hair with that comb, and always she felt her mother's fingers and the far-off smell of salt. The city's prosperity had always come from the sea. Fish swam fat at its doorstep. Ships kissed its docks. The salt pans shimmered like mirrors in the marshes beyond the last houses. But lately the tide had grown strange. It crept in late, it crept out early, and once, for the length of an entire market day, it did not come at all. The boats lay stranded, their bellies exposed to flies. It wasn't famine, yet only quiet panic. Men shouted at clouds, then at each other. Women lit extra lamps to coax the sea home. Prince Arad, heir to the House of Mayor, walked the parapets at night and tried not to show his fear. He was a curious prince, which is the most dangerous kind. He disliked sitting still under banners while old men debated. He liked to ask the river how it decided which banks to keep and which to eat. He liked dirtying his shoes in markets, talking to anyone who would talk back. He thought a ruler should know his city with the intimacy of a lover. Breath, heartbeat, secrets. The palace whispered that curiosity could be cured with duty. Arad was 20, courted by emissaries bearing trays of betel and proposals wrapped in velvet. He'd found reasons to delay. None of those envoys brought the city's heart with them. He thought, though he would never say this aloud, that he would know his bride the way he knew the sea breeze that lifted his hair at the parapet, or the way he knew the taste of water drawn from the palace well at midnight, as if made for him. On that 7th night, when the well sang, Arad was in the library, reading a chronicle of the city carved into wood. The words hummed a sleep song, and his eyelids drooped until a faint echo reached him through a window lattice. Who stole my name? He thought he'd dreamt it, and then he didn't, because sleep does not make your neck hair stand up. His feet moved before the rest of him decided. He took the narrow stair down to the inner courtyard. He came to the well and stopped short. A girl was kneeling by the curb, speaking into the dark. She had the steady confidence of someone who spoke often to difficult things, like heavy buckets, like landlords, like hunger. The moon made a shield of her cheek. When she straightened, she saw him, startled but not afraid. "You heard it?" Arad asked. She nodded. "I think it lost something." What could a well lose? He meant it as a joke, but her look was plain and patient as a night sky full of stars that expect you to understand them. "I don't know," she said, "but I said I'd bring it back." He should have asked her name and thanked her for her courage, and then woken the steward and done everything properly, with guards and torches and hand-wringing. Instead, the prince asked, "May I help?" "Do you know where names go, Prince?" the girl said. The word prince fell from her tongue without ceremony. It felt like a mirror that showed him as he was, not as he wanted to be. "No," he said, "but I could learn." The girl's mouth tilted. "Leela," she said, tapping her chest. "If you're going to help, you should know who you're helping." "Arad," he said, not bothering with titles. "If we get scolded for being here, I might need you to say you dragged me." "Don't worry," Leela said. "Everyone already says that about me." Behind them, the laundresses whispered in a flock. Beyond them, the palace lights were a constellation of careful order. Spread wider still, the city held its breath. The night's air was fat with the smell of drying kelp and distant fire. And down in the throat of the well, something shimmered like a coin, dropped back into a bowl. Some doors open only when the right two people knock at once. Leela had not told Arad about the comb. It had belonged to her mother. But the morning after the well sang, while carrying a basket of damp shirts to the east terrace, Leela passed the little shrine built into the base of the banyan, the one that belonged to no god in particular, only to the place. Old women tied threads to its roots. Children hid marbles there. Someone had left a saucer with sugared cashews. Leela stopped, took the comb from its pouch and pressed it to the shrine's cracked stone like a petition. "Show me where names go," she said. The comb warmed as if she'd held it long in her palm. And when she looked in its teeth, she saw, not her hair, not brass, water moving under starlight, and a voice like the well's voice but farther off, like wind on deep water. "Return what was taken." She jerked back. The image shattered to brass again. A crow in the banyan said, rudely, "Huh," and Leela laughed at herself to blunt the fear. She didn't tell anyone. Not yet. But ever since the well's question, small wrongnesses had bred like mice. The laundry water refused to boil. The copper kettles turned black. A child born 2 streets over with a fish-scale birthmark did not cry all day, only listened, as if to the rumble under the earth. The city's skeptics chalked all of it to coincidence. "Tides change," said the salt farmers, though their voices were too thin to be convincing. "Wells echo," said the engineers, "and kettles, well, that's a scouring problem." The vizier, Rauf ibn Nadir, whose face was always composed as a closed door, said, "We will not frighten the market with superstitions." "The prince will speak of stability." "He will not." He looked distastefully at Arad. "Dabble." For Rauf had his own problems. The treasury pillars, he knew, were hollow, filled not with coins, but with promises. He had bet against the sea's generosity by lending at interest to merchants who could only repay if the fish returned. Rauf did not believe in gods or ghosts. He believed in the weight of gold and the quickness of knives. If something ancient had woken in the well, he would teach it about the leverage of men. Leela's friend Tanu, wide-shouldered, loud laugh, eyes like sunlight on iron, urged her to stay out of it. "You already carry half the palace on your back," she said. "Don't carry its curses too." "It asked a question," Leela said. "Questions are seeds. If you don't plant them in answers, they go seeking cracks." Tanu threw her hands up. "You and your mother both," she said, "always feeding stray gods." Leela had an answer ready, something like "I'm feeding myself." But she didn't say it, because that night the well sang again, and the song was not a question this time, but a warning. "Return what was taken," it said, "or I will take what was given." When the sea turns its face away from a coastal city, the city learns the shape of its dependents. The fishmongers began to sell pickled things and old news. The shipwrights vanished without purpose. The salt farmers lay in their pans and listened to the sky. Every balcony over the harbour sprouted an extra lamp or two, offerings of light to guide a shy tide home. Arad convened his council and found it like a room full of thirsty men with cups they refused to fill from the same jug. We need to demonstrate control, Ralph said. Predictability markets can trust. We need to sacrifice a black goat, said an old nobleman whose family shrine smelled permanently of camphor. We need to listen, Arad said, not aimless now, but pointed, to the well, to the river, to the people who have been listening longer than we've been ruling. Listen to what? Asked Ralph. To laundresses and fishermen, to rumours and songs. Arad did not say, to Leela. He said, to the city itself. Ralph's mouth twitched. The city will listen to coin, he said. Handle prices, cut waste, post guards on the docks to keep panic from breeding. If your highness wants to go speaking to Wells, do it quietly. He left with a bow that didn't bend. Arad, watching him go, felt the familiar ache, the tightness of responsibility, and the irritation of a man whose rooms were too small for his questions. He went to the well. He did it quietly. He found Leela there, already waiting, as if she had expected him, which made him feel chastised and warmed at once. It said something else, she told him. Return what was taken. What was taken? Asked. Leela spread her hands. A name, a promise, a piece of itself. I don't know, but I think she took out the comb. This can help. Arad reached without thinking, then checked himself, because taking things from the hands of brave girls is one of the ways princes become villains in songs. May I see? He asked. Leela nodded and put it in his palm. The comb felt like yellow sunlight. He looked into its teeth and saw only his own dark eye and the quiver in his breath. He turned it over. The brass was old-fashioned, carved with wave curves, and the faint suggestion of a face that might have been a woman's or a tide's. In its spine was inlaid a thread of something not metal, not wood. Bone? Shell? That seemed to drink the moonlight and give it back saddened. And my mother, Leela said softly. She said her mother's mother's mother brought it from a village the river swallowed. I didn't believe her. She smiled crookedly. I do now. Let's ask, Arad said, and the ease of day was a door in his own chest he did not know had been shut. They leaned together over the well, the comb between them like a small piece of the past. Leela inhaled, let her breath go, and said into the dark, we want to return what was taken. Show us the way something rose, not water, not air, a coolness, a hush, a presence like a gaze. The bucket rope trembled, the comb in Arad's hand warmed until he hissed and almost dropped it. Then a ripple on the well's surface smoothed itself into a mirror. In it, Arad did not see two young people hovering over a circle of stone. He saw a long-ago hall carved of shell and light. A woman stood there, with a crown like a crescent bay on her hair. She was laughing. She held a comb that looked like Leela's comb, only new. A younger man, thin, earnest, eyes wide with wanting, reached to touch it, and she drew it back, laughing still, but with the edge of mischief sharpened. Not for you, little prince, she said, voice as clear as water in a conch. This is the key to my house. Without it I cannot return. He watched anyway. He watched as the man grew into a king, with a city at his back and fear in his throat because the sea had turned then too. He watched as the sea queen, whoever she was, returned with fish and fog, and kissed the city's shore with mercy. He watched the king kneel, humble for once, and ask, what do I offer for this grace? Respect, she said, offerings, a promise not to bind what should be free. He promised. And then, when the city grew rich, and his people grew proud, and memory grew thin, he broke his promise. He stole the comb. He hid it in the palace. He built a well on top of the place where the river ran close to the sea. He thought he had trapped a goddess's pathway. The mirror water shook. The image broke into droplets. Leela and Arad scattered back with cries of pain as the comb burned bright as a coal, and then, with a sound like a sob, went dead in Arad's palm. "Your ancestor," Leela whispered, not as accusation but as astonishment. He took her key and built a house over her door. Arad felt the shame like salt rubbed into soft skin. He wanted to deny it, to say it wasn't his doing, but something older than stubbornness stopped him. The well had not lied. The story rang right in his bones. "Then the thing to return is not only the comb," he said, forcing steadiness into his voice. "It's the door." Leela looked at the circle of stone. A door to a river's house under the earth. The idea should have been ridiculous. Instead, it felt like the clean, true centre of things. "How?" she asked. They looked at each other. The palace engineer would say, "Remove the stones." The vizier would say, "Remove the girl." The priests would say, "Remove your shoes and light 1,000 lamps." Tanu would say, "Remove yourself, Leela, from trouble's mouth." The city's skeptics would say nothing at all, for they would have left the courtyard already, gone back to the safety of explanations. Arad and Leela chose a different answer. They went to the oldest woman in the workers' quarter, Auntie Pema, who remembered when the river's name was sung at weddings. She sat on her veranda like a lighthouse on a headland and said, when they told her, "Of course, the well's a lock, the comb is the key, but locks rust, keys forget." "You'll need help." "What help?" Arad asked. "Her attention," Pema said, as if she were talking about a neighbour. "You must call her to the door you mean to open. She won't come for titles, she might come for honesty, and if she comes and is angry," Pema's eyes were a deep harbour, "then you had better be humble in your drowning." They gathered help of the right sort. Arad brought nothing but himself, and the willingness to say our fault. Leela brought the comb and a dish of milk. Auntie Pema brought stories and a song. Tanu brought her laughter, because laughter disarms pride, and, in case laughter is not enough, a stout stick. A handful of other workers came because Leela had done them small favours, like keeping secrets and turning troubles into tasks. They came at midnight, when the city is most honest. Ralph came too, not because anyone invited him. He came because he had spies like spiders in every room, and when he heard comb and door, gold rang in his ears. He stood at the cloister's edge with 2 guards and watched as if watching a theatre show. He planned to interrupt at the end and arrest the actors for being too artful. Pema sang first. Her voice was a reed flute, thin but true. None of them knew all the words. The river may have written them with its own alphabet and stones that had eroded away. The parts they knew meant, "We remember," "We did wrong," "We ask." The parts they guessed meant, "We remember," "We did wrong," "We ask." That was enough. Leela set the dish of milk on the well's lip and dipped the comb in. "Come," she whispered into the brass. "We're ready to listen." Arad knelt, palms outspread, empty. He did not think of kings. He thought of being a boy and falling into the irrigation canal and the water holding him up like a mother's hand until workers made a chain and pulled him out. He thought, "We are small. Please be big for us." Out loud he said, "Lady of Water, whoever you are, we stole. We are sorry." The courtyard air thickened, the lamps guttered, and then lengthened their flames into narrow blue knives. The night's insects hushed. The well's surface went dark, not because of shade, but because it had gained depth, the way a glance gains meaning. A pressure built in the space behind their ears. When she came, she did not rise like a woman from a bath, hair dripping pearls. She came like a piece of the night torn loose and given shape. Her face was underlit by her own radiance, as if she were lit from a source below that was also above, like a dropped star, like a well that led down into the sky. Where her eyes should have been, there were small, turning whirlpools, each with a glint at its heart. When she looked at Leela, the glints warmed. When she looked at Arad, the pressure behind his ears turned painful, then mercifully eased. Not my door. My name, she said, and though her mouth moved only minimally, the voice was everywhere. You built over my name. You drank my name. You turned my name into wages and obey. Lady, Arad began, and then stopped, because Lady felt too small. Forgive us, he said instead. I do not hoard grudges, the spirit said. Men do. I hoard names. Leela held out the comb, hands shaking. We brought this back. The spirit inclined her head, and for a moment the agitation in the air calmed. Ah, she said, and in that sound was a sigh, like tide flowing through pilings. Key. She reached, her fingers a complication of overlapping currents, and touched the comb. It did not move. Her fingers flowed over it. She withdrew. Rust, she said, forgetting. You will have to remember me with your own mouths. Then I can take this home. How do we remember you? Leela asked. The spirit's seabed gaze softened on Leela, the way a wave softens around a child's stubborn sandcastle. You, child, she said, you already know. She looked at Arad. You, prince, you learn tests then. They began that night and bled into the next day and the next, until the city's back ached with them. They were not feats of strength or magic tricks. They were acts of remembering. The spirit asked for a name, and they had to mean it. Not the prettied up temple name the priesthood had stuck on her like a label. Her true name, the one people used when they needed the river to not eat the last row of houses, the one mothers said between their daughters' braids when the world felt bigger than their hands. It was not one word, it was a weave. Call me as you would call a friend in a storm, she said. They tried, they failed, they tried again. Meanwhile, Ralph made his move. He sent men to seize the comb. He did it at noon, when the courtyard was full of light, as if light would make ugliness legal. Tanu intercepted them. The guards tried to be gentle, until their captain said, The vizier wants it. The way a tacksman might say, The king wants your eldest son. The word wants turned everything rigid. Leela stood behind Tanu, comb hidden in her sash. Arad came running. Pima remained seated, because age knows when standing is a waste of dignity and breath. Lord Ralph, Arad said, martial for once, you are interrupting a rite. This is not a temple, Ralph said, entering the courtyard with silk-smooth steps, and you are not a priest. We have mapped our pipes. The well is ours. There is no creature in it but water. The spirit, who was listening, though invisible, made the lamps rattle with her displeasure. If you want to stop madness, Ralph continued to the guards, take the comb. The captain looked torn. Law said obey the vizier. Face said obey the prince. Ralph sweetened Law with golden anger. He snatched for Leela's sash. Leela moved. She had learned to live by turning small spaces into ruits. She let Ralph overextend, pivoted, and Ralph tumbled ingloriously against the well's curb. His hand slapped into the dish of milk and sent it clattering. Milk streaked his robe like a crude blessing. And then, because contempt is heavier than milk, he did the worst thing he could have done. He spat into the well. The courtyard froze. A fly hit a wall and fell. The air drew back from their lungs. The spirit did not appear. She did not need to. The punishment, when it came, was not theatrical. It was precise. Every vessel of water in the palace soured, not with rot, but with memory. Whoever drank saw vividly every promise they had broken. Men retched, women wept. A great salt damp bloomed on the walls of the treasury, blossoming like white rot, and the locks fused as if with a tempering heat from within. Fish, dead for days, lifted on the harbour's still surface and showed their bellies, then rolled their eyes and sank not back into death, but into sleep. The tide came in once, all at once, 2 hours too early, and stopped at the palace steps, as if to say, "Next time I come further." Ralph's face, tight with rage, sagged with fear. He wiped the milk off his robe and looked smaller than he had 5 minutes before. When he tried to speak, his mouth filled with salt, so that he coughed like a man drowning on dry land. Arad did not crow. He lowered his head. "We deserve that," he said, and the honesty was like lifting a burden and discovering a stronger back underneath. "Lady, we see you. We will do right, return what was taken," said the voice from the well again, low enough to be mercy, loud enough to be law. "Not only the comb, the binding." So they went to work, the city's sceptical engineers, finally convinced by their thirst and by the way their tea tasted like tears, brought their maps. The old builders brought their hammers, the workers brought their backs. Arad brought the will to spend whatever had to be spent, not in coin, which had become shy encrusted with salt, but in prestige, apologising publicly, cancelling a tax, breaking an alliance with a merchant who delighted in squeezing fishermen thin. They uncovered the original spring that fed the well, a thin shimmer of cold water veering off from the buried river toward the palace. They found where men long ago had poured stone to narrow it, make it servants' water, obedient water. They knocked the stones away. They unseated bronze plates engraved with the names of kings who had congratulated themselves for bending a river's course. At the bottom, beneath the last plate, was a slab. It was not stone. It was something like shell and moon and bone. In it was carved a script none of them knew, except that they knew it meant her. It was her name, bound like a hawk's ankles. Leela touched it. The comb in her sash shivered. "Don't," Ralph gasped hoarsely from the edge of the work, his political sense not wholly diminished by terror. "If you break that, the palace may flood. The city will breathe," Pema said calmly. Arad looked at Leela. "Not my hand," he said. "Yours." "I'm a maid," Leela said, half in wonder, half in resistance, because she was used to being told there were things she should not touch. "You are the one who answered her first," Arad said simply. "That makes you the highest ranked person here." The workers laughed, not unkindly. Tanu thumped Leela's shoulder. "Go on," she said. "Do the impossible before fresh bread." Leela bent, set the comb into a groove she could not see until she needed it, and turned. The slab cracked like ice under a hoof. A line of light burst from it, not up but down, into the place under the world where the river keeps its unspent names. A sound rose. Not the well's voice, not the spirit's voice, but a chorus of names being released. It filled their mouths with salt and sweetness. The river's path, freed, stirred, the tide came in, slowly, properly, with its old courtesy, and the harbour sighed. Fish popped like tossed coins and dove. The smell of brine changed from threat to promise. In the courtyard, the spirit rose again. She was softened at the edges now, as if the boundary between her and the night had been abolished. "You remembered," she said. Her eyes, those whirling wells, settled on Leela first. "You in particular." Leela suddenly felt very young. "I just asked," she said, and turned the key. "Many ask in order to own," the spirit said. "You asked in order to return." She turned to Arad. "And you." He knelt without thinking. I broke your name," he said. "We thought the city's safety meant your obedience. We will fix it." The spirit inclined her head. "Hunger teaches humility," she said. "Humility teaches songs again." Ralph stood very still, both hands clenched like a child who refused to cry. The spirit looked at him and said nothing. Indifference, Leela realised, was heavier than anger. Ralph swayed. Tanu, who had less use for mysteries, put her stick down and wiped her eyes. Is that it? She asked. Are we done? Almost, said the spirit. Return the key properly, and accept the price of its keeping. She looked at Leela with a focus that felt like a hand on the crown of her head. Leela felt a jolt, like recognition. But of what? Then she knew, because the spirit's face, tied, light, dark, was also another face, younger, plainer, brown as riverbank clay. Leela had seen that face in a tin mirror every morning of her life. You are... Leela's voice split like the slab had, with awe running through the crack. You are... My daughter, the spirit said. The courtyard's shadowed corners inhaled, as if the city itself drew breath. Or rather, the daughter of my daughter's daughter's daughter. Your blood remembers. Your mother told you stories. She did not lie. Long ago I came ashore as a woman and loved a man of the river quarter. I left my hair comb with our child and asked them to pass it down, so I would not lose the way to you should you need me. You needed me. Leela's knees shook. Tanu caught her with an arm. Arad's heart stumbled, then ran, a deer startled and exultant at the same time. Then the truth, Arad whispered, is that a river's granddaughter has been washing royal shirts in our courtyard. A river's granddaughter, repeated Pema, grinning through tears. No wonder the well listened. Ralph sputtered. This is treasonous nonsense, he said, reaching for the comfort of the words he knew. She manipulates. The spirit's gaze flicked. Ralph shut his mouth, not by choice. He made frantic little gestures that meant I'm choking on my own pride in any language. Arad stood. The map in his mind rearranged itself. The city was not only doors, it was also veins, capillaries, breath, lineage. He bowed to Leela first because the rank of acts mattered now. Leela, he said, and his voice felt new to his throat. Nizamabad owes you its tide. I owe you more, Leela, trembling, laughed. I owe you, she gestured at the sky, the well, the spirit. This everything. So we're even not evens, said Pema, wagging a finger. Exchange, not erasure. Take good care with your words, or the wind will carry away your luck. The spirit stepped forward closer than before. The watery glints in her eyes turned warm. If you keep the key, she told Leela, my doors will always be ajar for your line. But keeping a key is not the same as owning a house. You must return it when I call, I will, Leela said, fierce with the fear of disappointing the grandmother she had only just met. I promise. The spirit looked at Arad. And you. He straightened, ready to be scolded again. You will bind no water, she said. You will divert none without asking. You will spend coin and pride to mend what your house broke. If you keep the girl, her heart, her hands, you will remember that you are not keeping a servant, you are partnering a river. Arad swallowed, a prince about to say a thing that might make his council wince forever. I love her, he said simply, because there was no room for ornament in that space. I loved her before I knew her lineage. I love her now because of it, and besides it, and after it. He looked at Leela and did not reach for her, because choice is a door one must knock on, not kick open. Will you? Leela, who had expected 1,000 princely ways to say, be mine, who had braced for bargains and debts, and an offering disguised as a command, felt the question like a door with her name carved into it. She tapped her pouch where the comb lay. Only if we marry the city too, she said, breathless with the audacity of it. Not just with lamps and songs, with pipes and laws, with wages that don't leak, with kitchens that don't hunger. If we promise the river, we'll stop sticking our straws into her wherever we please. If we hold the door open with both hands, Arad laughed, utterly undone. You ask like a queen, he said. I ask like a laundress who knows how many buckets the palace dirty work takes. Leela said. Choose? I choose, Arad said, and felt the world rearrange itself around his mouth's oath. I choose you. I choose the river. I choose the city, the spirit sighed, and in that sigh the harbour bells rang of their own accord, small music answering a larger. Then the key, she said. Leela drew out the comb and set it on the well's stone. The spirit laid her hand over it. The brass shone once brilliantly, like the inside of a shell when it catches the angle of the sun, and then went ordinary again, comforting in its weight. The spirit did not take it away. She left it there. Keep it, she said. Keys live with caretakers, not with doors. She looked once more at Ralph, whose face now wore the waxy look of a man who had been shown a ledger listing his crimes and debts. As for you, she said, I could drown you. But drowning is a forgetting. You will not forget. You will watch this city prosper without you. You will learn, if you can, the benevolence that feels like loss when you hold two. Tight Ralph's knees gave. Guards caught him. No one hurried to comfort him. Accountability is a cold room. Sometimes it is the only clean one. The spirit's edges grew diffuse, as dawn does before sun. When the tide is right, she said to Leela, come to the harbour at moonrise. I will show you where the river braids the sea. She tilted her head to Arad. Bring him. He will need to see the seams his maps do not show. Then she was gone, not like a flame blown out, but like the wind that was blowing it, becoming indistinguishable from the night itself. The courtyard woke. The lamps steadied. Far off a fisherman shouted, not in anger, but in the surprised relief of someone whose net had come up heavy again. Tanu released a breath like a curse and a blessing in one. So, she said, does this mean I call you your watery highness now? Leela laughed, hands still shaking. Call me Leela, she said, and fetch the baskets. There's work, Pema nodded, eyes bright. There is always work, child. That's the mercy. Work and songs. Arad looked at the well. He looked at the hands that had turned the key. He looked at the city beyond the palace walls. He thought, not with dread for once, but with joy, there is work. The tide, with exquisite politeness, came in on time that afternoon. The spirit's demand arrived in the language of law and river, both. It came as a set of stipulations, whispered through the city's pipes, carved into the pale shell slab now stored in the palace courtyard, and spoken by Leela at the council table, where she had never been invited before. Bind the river. No new dams without the spirit's consent, asked through ritual and public hearing. Ritual meaning songs and offerings, led by women who remembered, hearing meaning engineers with maps and citizens with needs, all in one room. Pay the water, a tithe from markets and merchants built on the river's back, to be used for cleaning the canals, shoring up houses the river nibbled, and feeding those it occasionally scolded by flood. Keep the door, the palace well to be made common, not as charity but as restitution, first cups drawn by children, the last by the prince. Remember the name. Each season a night of lamps set on the water, not only by the palace, but by every street that fed into the river, names spoken for the dead and for the water, because both are owed. Ralph choked on the second clause. A tithe, he said, voice harsh with the sand in his throat. The merchants will revolt. They will adapt, Arad said. His palm on the table felt steady. He had asked Leela to sit at his right. The seat had burned under other men's ambitions. Under hers it cooled like clay in rain. They will discover there is profit in gratitude. Sentiment, Ralph said, the word like a broken tooth in his mouth. Markets have no soul. Leela looked at him and said, quiet enough that the words had to cross only to him, perhaps not. But cities do, and they have long memories when wounded. The old nobleman shifted, unsure whether to be offended or to be relieved that someone else was being corrected. The engineers looked intrigued, like men given a new kind of problem that might be more elegant than the old ones. The fishmonger's guildmaster, who had been invited and had come with seaweed in his hair just to irritate the vizier, grinned. The council voted. It was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Arad signed with ink made of soot and oil and a drop of river water. Leela did not sign. She said that was a prince's job, but she spoke the spirit's name again, the long name, the woven name, and the ink gleamed. The city changed fast, where fast mattered. Guards at the well, not to keep people out, but to keep the queue fair. Diggers hired for canal clearing on wages that were not insult. The salt pans arranged so the marsh birds had their paths. It changed slowly, where slow was proper. Old men nodding at young women in meetings. Habit admitting it had been wrong. Songs remembered, not as nostalgia, but as instruction. On the moonrise appointed, Arad and Leela went to the harbour. They went with no trumpets, no banners, only with Tanu trailing behind, carrying a packet of sesame sweets, because even river grandmothers like something to chew. The spirit rose out by the breakwater, not as looming figure, but as a long, low shimmer. She led them, by the tilt of the water, by the warmth in Leela's palm where the comb lay, out toward the place where the brown of the river and the blue of the sea give up arguing and become the same green. Look, she said, and their eyes learned to see the braided channels, the secret living pathways underneath the visible, the way a city's economy runs under its public accounts, the way memory runs under speech. These are my names, she said. Say them when you dig. Say them when you build. Say them when you fall in love, and when you bury your dead. Names are bridges. Keep them clean. Arad reached for Leela's hand. He did not ask again. She had already answered with the way she stood by him in rooms full of men who didn't expect to listen. He simply held the hand that held the key. Will you bless us? He asked the spirit, not as rulers. As people, the spirit considered them with the long measure of tide. Blessings, she said, are not coins. I do not give them to be spent. I give them to be carried. She touched Leela's head. She touched Arad's chest, right over the heartbeat that had learned to count something other than itself. Carry this, humility that does not humiliate, courage that does not dominate, love that knows its own smallness and therefore does not fear. Leela laughed, wind-struck. That's heavy, she said. You are strong, the spirit said, with grand maternal certainty. The wedding was held not under the palace dome, but on the steps to the well at twilight, with the city standing shoulder to shoulder, in the courtyard and in the lanes, and on every rooftop, where a child might sit with knees up to chin. Pema sang. Tanu cried into the hem of her sari and declared it was only the smoke. Ralph watched from a distance, a man outside a house he had once thought was his, and felt some small, strange peace breathe under the old tightness, like a first loosening of a stubborn knot. Arad and Leela circled the well as a fire pit would be circled, because this was their hearth. They did not speak grand vows. They said, I will remember. They said, I will ask. They said, I will return what I take. The spirit was not visible, but the well's water made a sound like a grandmother laughing at a joke told long ago. And the audience laughed too, because sometimes release is learned behaviour. You see how easily the water does it, and you follow. That night, when the lamps frothed the river with little points of light and children sent paper boats to practice being stars, Arad and Leela stood at the palace parapet and watched. The city breathed. The tide slid in with the proprietary satisfaction of a cat who has found the warm side of the bed. Wonder, Arad said, not to name the view, but to name the thing in his chest that had replaced fear. Wonder, Leela agreed. And work. He grinned. Tomorrow, he said, we build a door that opens outward. She lifted the comb. It caught the moon, and just for a heartbeat became a sliver of sea. And we remember the names when we do. she said. Below in the lanes, someone began to tell a story about the time the well asked a question and a maid answered. Someone else corrected, not a maid. Leela, a child, asked, Who is Ralph? A mother said, Someone who forgot, and then remembered. And the child nodded, satisfied for now. The spirit, out at the breakwater, braided her names through the moonlight and smiled the kind of smile only rivers know. Relief, renewal, and the knowledge that tomorrow's hunger will come as surely as tomorrow's tide. The palace, no longer a lid on a door, but a house with a threshold, gleamed. Morale, do not bind what keeps you alive. Water, love, and names must flow. Respect ancestors not with stone alone, but with living memory. Songs sung, promises kept, doors kept open. When you take, return. When you break, mend. Humility is the bucket that brings the blessing up from the deep. Tonight, set a cup of clean water by your window or doorstep. Whisper the oldest name for the river or well near you, even if you only know it as the one that feeds us. Promise to return what you take. Pick up trash by a stream. Share food with someone who's hungry. Ask forgiveness for a promise you dropped. If you don't know the old names, call your elders and ask. Make a door in your life that opens outward. Then watch what comes in with the tide.